you mentioned the business of esports, your podcast. And now this is like mostly a gaming podcast. And I've seen lots of attention and lots of mixing up in the region here, as well as other regions, by the way, between gaming and esports. While I personally see it as like not a similar or not. I mean, it's a correlated industry, but it's not the same industry. I still feel that there's focus on esports and gaming at the same time here. Your podcast was business of esports, but you used to discuss mostly gaming gaming stuff. So what do you have to say about that?
Look, in retrospect, I probably wish I had called it the Business of Gaming podcast.
Okay.
If I could do it all over, which is why my show on CNBC is Game Changers. It's not, right? Like
Esports Changers.
It's much simpler branding. I think at the time, the thought esports, first of all, was a much hotter buzzword. So it was the product of its environment and its time and point in history.
Better for business tourism.
Better for listeners, attracting listeners, right? Like you just looked at what was being searched. Esports was a much higher search topic than anything else. So part of it was that. I think also there was this idea that I wanted to convince the world that gaming and esports as terms were interchangeable. They meant the same thing. And part of it was driven by this idea that if you and I go play basketball, on a public court or football, just in a field, just you and me, I could go home and say, I played a sport today. We didn't have an audience. We weren't professionals. We didn't get paid. There was no stage. All the things that today people adhere to this strict definition of esports, right? Professionals on a stage competing for money in front of an audience, right? Like, so to me, the word sport extended far beyond that tip of the iceberg, the top 1%. And so I figured, okay, if sports can do that, esports should have the same latitude, should have that same flexibility from a terminology standpoint. It should encompass everyone who plays. That was the idea. It's everyone who plays. That's what esports is. And I think I failed in that evangelism. Trying to convince the world that esports and gaming were the same didn't work. And today, esports is still the tip of the iceberg that people talk about in terms of competitive gaming, and gaming is broadly the industry of everything else, right?
Yeah.
Or at least esports is a subset of gaming. It's a small professional subset of gaming. And I think in some ways that's unfortunate. I'll tell you why. Because I think to get the masses interested in the business of gaming, the word sport feels more approachable for most people who aren't maybe hardcore gamers themselves. The same way metaverse as a word made gaming feel comfortable for investors. Because gaming feels, it's 12-year-olds in their basement.
Yeah.
I don't invest in 12-year-olds in their basement. But metaverse, well, that sounds professional. That sounds like the future, right?
Yeah.
I can get behind that. When in reality, metaverse and gaming, esports, it's all the same thing. And so I thought of it as a word that could make this more accessible to the masses because it played on something people already knew and understood. And I think I failed there because esports today has a very, very strict definition. It's a very, very minute, minuscule part of the gaming industry as a whole. It's really not even, it has no importance.
Yeah,
really.
This is my question. Why is there that much interest in esports in the first place?
It's misplaced understanding of where the value in the gaming market is.
Okay.
It's too many consultants who this is what they see or hear about, so this is what they report back as being important. It's if you let someone from McKinsey decide what is important, and that person has never played a game in their life, right? It's the result of that. The reality is esports has always been, since its inception, both financially unsustainable.
Exactly. I've read news about this. It's like I haven't seen anyone. I mean, I've seen some athletes actually making money and some teams making money, but usually sponsors and they don't make money from this.
I mean, and this is a very deep topic.
Yeah.
Why? Because, and the big answer is media rights don't exist in esports, A, and B, the games are still owned by the developers, right? Like, no one owns football,
Yeah.
but someone owns Counter-Strike
Yeah.
and can decide what you can and can't do with Counter-Strike. And so there's structural issues that I think prevent esports from being financially sustainable. The second piece that's problematic is it's still a highly niche product that is mostly used as a marketing exercise by the developers. In other words, I put on a big esports event not because I hope that esports event makes money. I'm happy if that breaks even. But what I want is people to buy the latest DLC for my game, or buy the battle pass that's attached to this esports event, or the compendium in the case of Dota, or whatever it is, right? Like, there's a lot of ways of using esports as a marketing tool, in which case it's an expense.
Yeah.
It's an expense line, not a revenue line. And then you can justify it. It's no different than buying Google Ads.
Yeah.
Right? So what I love about esports is great marketing tool, has worked quite well. You look at League of Legends, Riot has done an incredible job of using esports as a way to increase the audience of players of League.
Yep.
But as an endeavor, as a standalone endeavor, I think it's always been a mistake to pursue. Now, the asterisk there is, if you have unlimited funds and you don't know what to do with it, put on the biggest esports events you want, right? Like, at that point, the business playbook gets thrown out the window, and you go,
Yeah.
if money is no object, great. I think it's cool. And this is sort of where Saudi Arabia is. Yeah, I think the people of Saudi Arabia think having the Esports World Cup there is something to be proud of, and it doesn't matter what it costs, and it doesn't matter how much money it loses. And that's fine. I applaud that, as long as we're all honest about it, and we're not pretending like this is going to lead to some $1 trillion esports industry that is financially sustainable. No. Saudi Arabia will need to continue to write hundreds of millions of dollars of checks every year to keep that Saudi esports ecosystem afloat.
Now that you've been talking about this, I think this is my opinion. There are two sides why the governments here, or I mean the region in general, is interested in esports. One is because it's one of the we consume games the most. I mean, the average revenue per user is the highest here in the region.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So we're consumers of games. That's why esports might make sense. So
Yep.
our youth might become athletes at some point. The other one is, I think, because the region missed on the traditional sports.
True.
So maybe esports would one day become something interesting. Like that one day would become an industry where we could have the Real Madrid, the Barcelona, the Manchester United here in the region, but for the esports, it's
Again, because of the structural differences, I'm not convinced.
Definitely.
Right? You could get maybe pretty close to break even, but this is not going to be a major GDP contributor. And the reality is, like, esports are fundamentally a digital product. So even the tourism argument is not that strong. Yes, you may end up with an event eventually that's as big as, League of Legends World Championships. And you may get 100,000 people that show up and fill a stadium to watch an event for 4 days. But beyond that, the majority of the viewers are going to be online, right? That's always the case in esports. There's always more people watching online than in the stadium. So the tourism argument is maybe weaker even with esports than it is with traditional sports. Weaker even than like, you're better off investing in Taylor Swift concerts if you want to drive tourism.
Yes.
But what I like about esports is it's still the tip of the iceberg. It's the visible, sexy part that people see. So from a marketing standpoint, from a selling the vision standpoint, from a inspiring the people around standpoint, it's a good opportunity. Like, I don't poo-poo it completely. It's a good opportunity. It's the aspirational kind of it's the 911, right? It's the Porsche 911.
Yeah.
You sell a few Porsche 911s, you make no money on 911s, but because you sell the Porsche 911, a bunch of people buy Cayennes.
Yeah.
where you make a lot more money, right? So it's still that aspirational tip of the iceberg, which I think has a place if you're resource rich. So for places like Abu Dhabi, for places like Saudi Arabia, it makes sense. If I'm Morocco, going after esports to me makes no sense at all. This is not playing to your strengths.
Yeah.